Good evening, everybody. I am not John King. I do not have a picture of the United States and the red and blue behind me. We talk sports over here. My name is Stephen Rabinowitz.
My name is Jay Kaplan.
And I'm Anthony Strait, and I'm also not Anderson Cooper, and nor is a CNN. Thank God.
I'm not even Steve Kornacki either. Welcome to the NFL mid-season report of On the Sports Lines. We will talk all things local and National Football League in just a moment with our frequent special guest, Joe Tufaro. But first, the opener. So, since we talked about the World Series last week, let's deal with the boys of summer again, because the weather is kind of matching outside right now. Two new teams have new retread managers at their helm, while one other manager might be going back to the same team. So we'll talk about all three of these situations. Anthony, we start with the Detroit Tigers, who basically waited until 1 second after the season was over to make a phone call to former World Series winning cheating manager AJ Hinch. Oh, where did I add that cheating? I'm sorry. Anthony, is this the right hire? And should the Tigers have reached out this quick? This is a pretty quick hire.
You know what? It's kind of a surprise of how quickly that they hired him. I mean, they literally waited a second after the World Series was over. By the way, a year to the day that AJ Hinch was managing the Astros, and they lost Game 7 of the World Series at home to the Washington Nationals. So there's a little irony to that. But I mean, look at this. I mean, Hinch is taking over a rebuilding team, almost in the same situation he was in Houston when he took over as manager, but that team was more on the rise. And Detroit is, well, let's just say, what was their record this year? Okay, not good. They stunk.
It hasn't been good for years.
23-35 is actually a decent record because it's the Detroit Tigers, and we only played 60 games. They've been far worse. But the dark cloud of the cheating scandal is always going to follow AJ Hinch wherever he goes. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, look, if he's able to turn around Detroit and they can put together a couple of winning seasons, guys develop, maybe become a contender in the American League Central, that's a great redemption story for what it's worth. But for right now, I mean, when you look at Hinch, it's hard to overlook that he was pretty much the central guy in the cheating scandal. And the fact that he may or may not have known what's going on, but the most important thing, he didn't do anything about it. And that's why he got the hammer thrown at him. And that's just going to follow him pretty much his entire career. And he has to make this work in Detroit, because I don't know if he would get another managerial opportunity somewhere else. So this is going to be a wait-and-see approach to see what's going to happen in Detroit. He's not going to be under pressure to win right away, so maybe that'll help him under these circumstances. But then again, when the fans start coming back to the stadium, and we know eventually they will,
Yep.
We saw how the Astros players responded to having pitches thrown at them, and famously Joe Kelly of the Dodgers with that meme. But Hinch is kind of the guy that had to sit back for the year and kind of suffer in silence. Now he's going to be obviously out in the spotlight again as the manager. And I'm quite sure he's got a few players on his own roster that was kind of victims of the Astros' alleged cheating. Well, alleged cheating, I put it out there because it was proven, but I have to say it. But it's like I said, it's going to be a wait-and-see approach to see how Hinch is able to come in, see what he can do, if he can replicate the magic that happened in Houston, starting from 2015 on, when they became a wildcard team, suddenly out of the gate, has one of the team's youngest rosters. So, like I said, Detroit, they haven't had a lot to really be happy about just across the board as far as sports, but maybe it's a good cover for AJ Hinch in this case.
Yeah, it might be. And along with AJ Hinch comes the other man who was a fall guy in this whole scandal, and that means Alex Cora. He is still not actually with the team yet, but is a finalist to rejoin the team. He won it back back in 2018, the Boston Red Sox. Jay, Alex Cora's chances in the major leagues.
You know, I mean, when I originally pitched this segment, neither Hinch nor LaRussa had been hired, so it was kind of going to be how we all felt about the possibility of Hinch and Cora returning to dugouts in 2021. Now Hinch is in Detroit. Cora could possibly be back with the Red Sox, as Boston's chief baseball officer, Chaim Bloom, has not ruled out a reunion. I always felt that Cora deserved a stiffer punishment than Hinch. My take on the Astros cheating scandal was Hinch was guilty of negligence and turning a blind eye, bashing TV monitors aside, while Cora was one of the leaders of the operation and as such should have been hit harder by baseball. The Red Sox made the right decision not to allow Cora to manage the team this past season, but if they take him back in 2021, is that the right decision? I know our society, especially with athletes and celebrity, loves a good, as Anthony said, redemption story. And I get that as far as baseball is concerned, Cora has served his time and is now free to resume his managerial career if a team will have him. And hell, guys, World Series winning managers are hard to find, so why wouldn't a team want him, right? The Athletic did a nice in-depth piece on Hinch and Cora talking about 20 current and former players, coaches, executive, and agents. And among some of the front office decision makers, there was a resigned pragmatism that, of course, these two guys, are going to get another shot. According to some of the executives, they'd served their sentence. They'd proven they can win. The cheating might hurt their case, but it would not be a disqualifier. And another executive put it this way, quote, "The public comments from their friends will be very supportive. They paid their dues. But there's a huge underbelly in the game that's got a big problem with this. And I have to say, I may have a bit of a problem with this as well. Maybe it's because of the way this baseball season played out, guys. 60 games instead of 162. So it seems like the year-long suspension passed quicker than usual, even though they both spent the usual time that a baseball season runs on the outside away from the game. Players seem to be more annoyed about this than either of these guys will be back in a dugout soon. And I can understand the feeling. I'm feeling that somewhat as well. It just seems to be not long enough. But when you consider that the NFL routinely gives second, third, fourth, fifth chances to players who have lent new meaning to the phrase conduct unbecoming, Antonio Brown being the latest example, I guess it shouldn't surprise me or anyone else that Hinch is already back in a dugout and Cora probably won't be far behind. Few have shown to be more capable than these two guys in terms of tactics, strategy, interpersonal skills, media presence. And before being busted for their roles in the Astros cheating scandal, they were seen as the model for the new modern manager. So, and if you consider that the immediate PR hit is eventually going to dissipate as the season goes on, what owner wouldn't overlook the negatives of bringing a guy like Cora who has a World Series title to his name? And when you have an ownership group like the Red Sox pretty much telling us that in their minds, now that Cora's suspension is over, he'd be welcomed back with open arms, to quote CEO Sam Kennedy, Cora is an extreme talent who would soon undergo a process of rehabilitation. It sends a message that talent's always going to win out. I guess if you serve your time, society should allow you to return to your life. Does it mean Cora deserves another chance to manage the majors? I don't have that answer, but I have a feeling the point's going to become moot a lot sooner than some people may like, me included, maybe.
Yeah, here's the thing. The only reason why the Red Sox are thinking about hiring Alex Cora back is because Ron Renneke really couldn't do anything with that team this year. And I think the Astros would have easily hired AJ Hinch back if Dusty Baker didn't get them to Game 7 of the ALCS.
Quite possibly.
It's about results. Okay. So Tony LaRussa didn't do anything wrong, as you just mentioned. He didn't get suspended for anything, but he is now the 76 years young manager, the man who is about to lead the White Sox, who fired a AL Manager of the Year candidate or couldn't agree to a contract extension with Rick Renteria. So Tony LaRussa is, by the way, if you ever wanted to tell a question of white privilege, here it is, Stephen A. Smith, not with Steve Nash's hire. This kind of reminds me of a culture war move by Jerry Reinsdorf. Hired Tony LaRussa back in the 80s. He got fired by then GM and White Sox legendary broadcaster Hawk Harrelson, something I didn't really know. I feel like this is a move to tell the team of the White Sox, hey, we don't appreciate your antics. Tony LaRussa is the old schoolest of old school managers. Remember when
you think he's more old school than Buck Showalter?
Yes, he is, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. Remember the whole Fernando Tatis thing from earlier in the year with the grand slam and on a 3-0 pitch?
Yep.
Steve said that there should have been sportsmanship involved, and it was wrong. White Sox shortstop Tim Anderson on the same thing was quoted that the only thing Tatis did wrong is apologize. So
Agreed.
there are so many different scenarios with this team. There's so much young talent on there. You have Abreu. You have one of the younger teams in baseball who had a pretty damn good season getting back into relevance. And now you got a man who has gone against standing up for basically kneeling down for the national anthem, although he kind of walked that back a little bit earlier when he got into his press conference, but he basically affirmed it back in February. So I don't know what would change between February and now.
He got hired.
Yeah, anybody should. And in fact, it's the reason why Tony LaRussa is Tony LaRussa. He's been in front offices for many years since he won it all with the Cardinals back in 2011. I don't know what to expect from him this time around. There's so much more analytics to the game. We just argued about analytics last week when Blake Snell got taken out of the sixth inning of a World Series when he had only given up 2 hits. So he's going to have to be a person who has his old school style meshed with analytics. If not, and if he doesn't let the players at least cook, so to speak, we could be having a franchise stopper because there could be a lot of upheaval in the clubhouse, something you don't want for a team this
year. You know what, Rabbi, when you text me this, the news of Tony LaRussa's hire, and I'm thinking about the clubhouse he's walking into, it's like the cast of characters of PlayStation's Backyard Baseball, Pablo Sanchez included, is now being managed by Walter Matthau, the Bad News Bears variety.
That's pretty
I'm
much
just like,
man.
how is this going to work? Like,
we don't know.
The most old school manager you could possibly think of.
Yeah.
Like, literally, Bunches and Oats against Honey Nut Cheerios, which is Tim Anderson, one of the most outspoken people you could possibly have. A team that is literally always having fun in the clubhouse. Literally, during playoff games either, they didn't even look like it was an elimination game, and they didn't even look even remotely stressed out about it. It's gonna, you know what?
They lost that game, by the way, so maybe they should have lost. They should have looked stressed out about it.
Well, yeah, they did, but it was a great effort. I mean, and give your opponents credit. Look, it gives me a reason to watch the White Sox next season at least.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a complete shit show. We have to move on since we're about to go into the NFL. So, gentlemen, some teams have played 7 games this season, but a bunch have played 8 games. So, you know what? I'm calling it the mid-season. I hope everybody agrees. That's why it's
you can call it that.
Let's talk in and out New York and national with our guest, now writing for The Last Word on Sports, Mr. Joe Tufaro. Good evening, Joseph.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, how are you guys?
He is at Tough Dan across all platforms. Welcome back. Our first talk tonight will be the number 2 pick in the NFL draft if the season ended today, the New York Giants. Going back to week 16 of 2019, their list of teams that have beaten have been the Washington football team, and that's it. Their 1-7 struggles this year can be attributed to a lot, but we all come back to the ups and downs of their QB, Daniel Jones. We've got some questions for Joe. Joe will give us answers, and then we'll dispute. Jay, start us off.
All right. So the way this segment is going to work is that I'm going to ask Joe to grade the offense, and then I'll ask him to grade the defense. And
don't give away our game plan.
People need to know how this is going to play out. Joe, we have talked at length about the ongoing situation that is the Giants offense all season, either here on this show or in our Twitter DMs. And despite the loss of Saquon Barkley for the season, Sterling Shepard for 4 weeks, the inconsistency of Evan Engram in the offensive line, the Jekyll and Hyde performances of both Daniel Jones and Darius Slayton, often in the same game, and the sometimes curious conservative play calling of Jason Garrett, which has improved of late. Despite all this, the Giants have been in every game, have always come prepared, and with one more play or one better decision by Jones, I think we can agree they'd be better than 1-7. But for me, they are 1-7, and your record says who you are. The grade is a D+ at midseason, though I do see signs of improvement each week that lead me to believe they can potentially get much better, as they've gone from averaging 12 points a game in their first 4 games to more than doubling it over the last 4, 24.5. So, like I said, my grade is a D+. What's yours?
I'd give it a C just because I think it's a work in progress. And
Okay.
when you started from not having any preseason games, you started with a brand new system, a brand new head coach, a brand new offensive coach, a new system completely, an offensive line that was in flux at best, where they had to bring, you're playing rookies, you're playing second-year guys, you're playing a lot of different bodies up there, which I like that they're doing. Again, the injuries have hurt, bringing in a Devonta Freeman who's done well, but again, took him 2 weeks to really get started back into the flow of things. So I think it's a difficult, the original question was what's the highlight of the offense so far? And you really can't pinpoint anybody on this offense who's played above and beyond what you thought they would do. I think they've managed to stay in every game a lot more because of the other side of the ball, but I think that the offensive line, again, I like the way they play everybody who's dressed. They move guys in and out. They're treating it like it's a exhibition season of let's see how we can grow all these guys. Evan Ingram saw what happens when you don't concentrate and you don't play as hard as you can. And I think what he's getting now, he's got a really good coach, is in Freddie Kitchens, of all people, that I would say that.
Yeah,
But he has good coaching in that he is also now not just told, hey, you're a big, fast guy, go out there and play. They correct everything that every player does every week. Joe Judge said today in one of his press conferences, he said, look, I'm tough on everybody, and every play we can look to make better. So we're not that we're so bad on people. We'll show you what you did well. We'll show you what you did wrong. He said, and by the way, we're all perfectionists. So we're always going to find something we can say, hey, you can do better. When Ingram made that dive for the goal line the other day on the play where he went out at the 2, Joe Judge said, hey, we tell our players don't do that because 2 things can happen. If you fumble the ball through the end zone, you give them the ball on the 20, or we lose it and they have it somewhere else. So again, 3 things can happen there. 2 of them can be bad. So we're telling you, unless it's 4th and goal or a 2-point conversion, we don't want you stretching the ball out next to the pylon. It's too easy to make that mistake. So he's getting really good coaching now. And you see Slayton getting better. You see all of these guys progressing every week. And they're playing one of the toughest, as we talked about in the beginning, playing one of the toughest schedules out there.
Yeah.
And they've managed to stick within 2, it's 7 points the last 5 games or whatever that they've lost by. So they've managed to play everybody. Now it's a matter of putting it all together. And I think the assessment on Daniel is, and it's kind of good, it came from outside the building and it didn't come from the media, and it came from Bruce Arians, that he said he thinks he's trying too hard.
Yes.
When he's got a guy draped on him, he's still trying to get it to the player instead of throwing it out of bounds.
Or taking the sack.
He's not, yeah. And again, you don't want to teach guys to take sacks because then you start to get into that, I'm not athletic enough to get away. But he's also not Ben Roethlisberger yet. He's not that size that he can get somebody grabbing on his shoulder and he goes, yeah, whatever, and throws it anyway. He's not that big. He's that competitive that he still thinks he can make the throw and he still has the time. And I think that just comes with playing. Again, it's really his first year and this system and getting to learn everything else and trying to get that offensive line going. So I don't think there's one bright spot on this offense, but I think you can see it, again, another test this week where they go up a very good, as Anthony likes to tell me about, their defensive front in Washington. That's what they're going against every week, right? They're going against great pass rushers, and these guys have hung in there and done well.
Yeah, I mean, in Jones's numbers, if you split weeks 1 through 4 plus 5 through 8, his numbers have gone up across the board in the last 4 games as the Giants offense has seen some, baby step improvements. So that kind of you got to let this play out and see how he ends up.
Right.
When you go from a 68.3 passer rating, in your first 4 games to 80.6 over your last 4 games, you are making strides. So, as you said, no exhibition season. So you figure that maybe that's what games 1 through 4 are. Let's see where it goes the remaining 8 games. And it'll be interesting to see where this grade ends up at the end of the season.
It's funny though. It's almost like it's like one step forward and two steps back, especially this season for Jones. And if you looked on Monday night, I mean, I know we don't really listen to announcers talk. I mean, I really don't want to think of getting any tips from Brian Greasy and Louis Riddick on good quarterback play. But they know football, and there were a lot of passes that Jones just couldn't get.
I will say, Steve and I didn't text Jay, who I usually do. I was talking to Chris Delgado most of the night. I said in the beginning of the game, after I saw a couple of his first throws, I said, gee, it must be windy in the stadium tonight or something. It didn't look like it was coming out of his hand very well at all.
No.
It looked like he was off. He's usually very good at long throws. He missed every one of them.
Yeah.
He was behind guys. He was in front of guys. So that was an off night. And I'll tell you what, you can be the optimist that I usually am. If that's an off night, I'll take it.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's still a lot of room for improvement, and I think Jones takes a lot of that loss on himself. And frankly, there were a lot of things that he did that were evident of a sophomore. Anthony?
It's not a one-person fix.
No.
Hey, Joe, I know you and I have definitely gone back and forth over the season about the Giants' defense. And obviously, they have played better than expectations coming into the season, but they've always seemed to be one stop or one play away from maybe potentially winning the game for the Giants. I mean, you think about how good they've actually played to keep them in the competitions, but even as the offense has struggled. I would like to know what grade at this point in the season would you give the Giants defense?
And again, you got to kind of split between coaching and players and that kind of stuff. I'd give him an A- at this point, just to say, I thought the two mistakes they made the other night was, for some reason on 3rd and 15, 3rd and 16, he rushed 3 guys and kind of kept somebody as almost a spy, which doesn't need to be.
No.
Because that was the one benefit you had last week, was Tom Brady wasn't going anywhere. So that was odd. There was 2 times in that game that they rushed 3 players against Tom Brady and let him stand back there and gave them time to complete on 2 long passes. I think it was 3rd and 16 and 3rd and 14 that they did that. But I think this unit, again, they translate all those front guys. They all play. Everybody rotates in and out. Peppers and Martinez have been magnificent.
Yeah.
They both get A+ as far as I'm concerned. Martinez may be one of the best signings we've ever had as a team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So you've got him, you've got Fackrell, who's played well. But again, Cora and Kaplan gets a sack towards the end of the game. You get different guys coming in. Logan Ryan, the other cornerback, Bradbury, who they brought in, another great signing, who's played very, very well. And so they've all played well within the scheme. And again, I think that you see that again. It's improving every week. The scheme has gotten more accepted the better they play. I think that they start to gain that confidence that the system really does work. And you got a lot of guys that are buying in there, a lot of guys who like being there. There's no one except somebody on the offensive side of the ball that seems to be complaining about situation or how the games are going. These guys are really bought in. And, I wouldn't be shocked if they suddenly went on a run. Now, they're not going to beat a Baltimore and they're not going to beat a couple other teams. But if they went out and beat Washington, Philly, Dallas, Cincinnati, and somebody else and wound up with 6 wins, I wouldn't be shocked.
Maybe Cleveland would be probably a good choice on that.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think anyone would sit back and say, where'd that come from, or don't believe what you see at the end of the season. That's realistic. And I think that would really do a lot for this team.
I know for me, I would definitely give them a B-. And I say that because we look at the defensive line has definitely been their biggest strength in stopping the run, especially on 1st and 2nd down. You look at Dexter Lawrence, Tomlinson, Leonard Williams, literally it looks like he actually fit this scheme perfectly. And then you think about B.J. Hill and McIntosh and Austin Johnson, the guys that can rotate in and out along the front lines, keep them fresh. They've been really good at stopping the run and generate a pass rush even when they're not blitzing, something that we haven't seen in years from this defensive unit.
Yeah.
Blake Martinez has been an outstanding signing, and obviously a tackling machine when he was in Green Bay. And Bradbury has played exceptionally well, and Jabril Peppers also stopping the run. Marcus Stone who's line up on the other side of Bradbury because they kind of rotating guys out. Ryan Lewis is kind of the latest on that secondary corner side, and he has struggled. He got the game in Philadelphia. He gave up a big pass play. He drew a bad pass interference call at really late in the game, and that's been a really big concern. And one of the things I was wondering is why wouldn't Logan Ryan line up as the second corner option? But he's played very well as a nickel, so it's kind of put the Giants a bit of it's put Patrick Graham a bit of a bind. Is that now you have to kind of compensate for a glaring weakness in your secondary. Because if you blitz, then you're leaving them one-on-one. You know, one side of the field is covered, but then there's that other side you can't compensate for. And I do feel like the Giants' defense has really kept it. Like, Graham has done a great job in his first year, basically installing a brand-new system where you can change parts in and out depending on the opponent, which you don't often see in the NFL these days. Because, you know, coaches are very stringent. They want their system to be done, and they don't bend the will to the player. But to see it with the Giants is a great sign. And you can make the argument that the Giants, you know, because of the defense, had they got a player or two from the offense, they probably would have a better record and maybe a realistic shot at winning the division. But after the Philadelphia loss, you know, it's better kind of see where you go from now and see what you have to build for next season. But right now, the Giants' defense is definitely the strength of this team.
Yeah, and what you said, Anthony, was very good in that I like that they like to move on. You know, don't forget that, you know, there are other cornerbacks in jail, by the way, you know, or waiting to see if he's, you know, they didn't lose 2 guys in 2 years that were supposed to be that other guy. What I do like, however, is they move on kind of quickly. You know, they traded to Marcus Golden after they signed him and brought it back. They don't like that part. They don't stick with guys. They don't just stick Corey Ballantyne out there and say, hey, I hope it works out for 16 games. You know, they brought in Yadam from Denver. They bring in guys all week long. They bring in players. They switch around. They try different schemes. They try different things. And like you said, they've been getting pressure against Tampa. They got pressure all night with 4 guys.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a huge help, as you all know, that's if you can get pressure with 4, and you don't have to play man-on-man, so you have to worry about the quarterback running, that's a huge advantage. And they've really done that where Joe Judge said this in the beginning was, our scheme's different every week. Patrick's scheme is different every week depending on the opponent. And that's what it's been, and it's obviously worked. Because they've only had that one poor performance that, again, I think that was a shell shock of losing Saquon and Shepard and all that kind of stuff in 1 week, and that was just a bad performance. But other than that, you know, I think they're obviously in the right direction.
I do think, though, that there have been moments of weakness that has almost killed that secondary. Eagle game, the second half, Cowboy game in the second half, and obviously the Bucs game a little bit on Monday night. But me and Jay, we were going back, and I said Mike Evans is just a bad matchup for.
Yeah, he's a bad. I mean, like you said, 80% of the cornerbacks he's a bad matchup for. So you know.
So we'll see, and I do think they have a little bit of a run on the second and going into.
I think that this defense holds up enough if the offense can get to
absolutely.
You know, which is what you do in the NFL these days. So.
Yeah, I mean, you need offense in the NFL almost first and foremost. Anyway, Joe Judge, it's year number 1 of the Joe Judge campaign. I feel like this could easily be an incomplete grade just because he's been in so many games and they just haven't finished it off. But you can't blame that on coaching, or can you? I feel like coach is just one of those weird positions where they get all the blame, but they really shouldn't. It's just they're usually the first fall guy. But for Joe Judge's first year, do you give him a grade, or do you think he's still he has done it well?
I give him A+. He has come in with a plan. He has stuck to his plan. He has a plan for – this is a guy who's been coaching his whole life since the minute he stopped playing which he only played a couple of years in the NFL, he is like a very young Tom Coughlin. You see that he is prepared and remembers things that happened. Tom Coughlin told a story about when he was coaching, who knows, back in Army or Syracuse, someplace very small. It was before Syracuse. He was coaching a very small school as an assistant coach. And their long snapper got hurt. And they had nobody else to long snap. And they lost the football game because they didn't have anybody. And then famously, years later in the NFL, at the end of practice, he would get all his linemen and all of his centers to go practice long snap. And they said, they hate me for it, the last 10 minutes of practice. But they played a famous game against Pittsburgh, where Pittsburgh lost their long snapper and had to have Joey Porter long snap, and that did not work out well. And the question after the game was, what would you do in that situation? And Tom said, well, that happened to me 25 years ago. And so since that day, wherever I've been, I've practiced guys at that position. And that's how Judge seems to be. He has this knowledge from all of these years of soaking it up from Belichick and Saban and all these other great coaches. And they are prepared for every little thing. They had a COVID outbreak last week. They didn't miss a beat. They knew to send the guy home. They didn't close the practice. They didn't close their facilities. They immediately went to Zoom meetings. They did this. Nobody else got sick. They brought in guys from the offensive line from the practice squad, and they played a game, and they played very well. And they played well because Shane Lemieux had played. He had practiced. He had been in all the meetings. They had other guys who they brought up who have played. Matt Pert has played in the NFL. He hasn't just stood on the sideline going, yeah, I was drafted, and that was it. So he's very, very prepared with everything. The way he's handled discipline with Thomas by being late for a meeting, the way he handled Golden Tate. He has a plan for everything that happens. And he is I think he's a little ahead as far as thought process goes, that the announcers get confused. The other night, they didn't put a guy back for punt return on 2 punts. Left the gunner standing there by himself. Well, the scouting knows that the punter that they have in Tampa can't throw the ball. He's not like an ex-quarterback. He's not like the guy Johnny Hecker or something like that. He's not a quarterback. And they said, once you start rushing 10 guys at a punter, all he wants to do is get it off. And he's not a very strong punter. And actually, the 2 balls that they let bounce back towards the line, almost 15 yards. He said he got off a 32-yard punt, and we had a chance to block it. So, again, when the announcers are going, oh, what are they doing? They're confused. They don't have enough players on the field. And you go, no, maybe somebody's actually planned this, and you don't understand it because you're not there. And that's why national broadcasts stink, because because he's not going to go, Steve Levy's not going down on the field and asking him after the game why he did it and then explaining it the next day in a column. He's just going on to the next game. He's talking about, we're here for the Jets. We should just stay in New York instead of going all the way back to Connecticut. That's all they talk about is themselves. So I think that Judge is very, very good with players. What he did this week with Logan Ryan, with his wife who was sick, and told him, we'll fly you back to Florida if you need to be with her. And he's a very, very good disciplinarian, but he's a player's coach at the same time. He's very bright. He holds his coaches accountable. He holds his players accountable. He holds himself accountable. I just think that, Tom Coughlin used to say this too. We have team rules. Those are non-negotiable. Even Pat Shermer used to say, we have team rules. Those are non-negotiable. There are other things that we can discuss with the captains and the leadership committee. And then there are things I don't really care about. Social media or whatever, we'll let somebody else handle those type of things. That was Pat's downfall a little bit. But Judge is the same way. We have team rules. You play for the team. It's always team first. You're not selfish. You're not this. And he's going to stick to it. And I think he's building the culture. And the fans are good with it. We're okay that he's building a culture. He's teaching these guys. He's coaching. He's holding his coaches accountable to get better every week along with the players. And I think that you can see where it's going in a direction, even if you disagree with something. He obviously has a plan, and it seems like a good one. And I'm extremely happy. You know me, I don't listen to press conferences. I read them because I think you find out a lot more about the actual words that are said than what questions they answer. And if you read through those, you know, this guy is very consistent from day one. And he says it all the time. You know, we hold ourselves, you know, it doesn't ever rip somebody and say, oh, that interception's on Daniel. And say, yeah, I'm sure he had a throw. Maybe he won back. We're going to look at it. We'll talk to him about it. We'll handle it. But it's also on the pressure. It's also on the route that was run. It's a team game. We're going to play it as a team. You know, he has this thing. He talks about complementary football all the time. And he says, look, the special teams pins a guy on the 10, pins a team on the 10-yard line. The defense gets excited to hold that field position. And then you hold that field position to give the offense better field position. And then if they don't score, you want to, again, keep that field. You want to punt it back to them at the 10. So, you know, every drive should end with a kick, a punt, or an extra point. He doesn't want turnovers. He doesn't want penalties. And, again, they seem to be teaching things that are helping these guys, not just, again, throwing them out there and taking the same penalty every week. So I'm very pleased.
Yeah, I'm thinking the way that he has built the culture right now with the Giants, it almost reminds me of a Mike Vrabel with Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And the only thing is, Jay said before, you are what your record says you are. But, and again, as a Giant fan, I think all three of us think it's a little bit frustrating to see them just not being able to finish games. But they are on the right track. I've had some doubts about Daniel Jones, especially after this week. But right now, the organization's future seems to be bright, and especially when you dealt with two of the worst coaches in this franchise's history over the 4 years previous, and Ben McAdoo, who only got to the playoffs because he had a damn talented team around him and no real pressure, and Pat Shurmur, who I've never liked as a head coach and is always going to be a coordinator for life. It's good to see right now, especially after the first 3 games, that after the first 8 games, that Joe Judge is really a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, you know what? It's a thing, too. You mentioned Joe Judge being a disciplined, but also listen to his players. It reminded me of 2 former Giant coaches. Bill Parcells, famously, I remember the 87 NFC Championship game, telling Phil McConkey to field the punts in the win, and that actually played a big factor in field position in that game against Washington. But also Jim Fossil, his first year with the Giants. And I don't know, you know, heads up, but I mean,
there's a couple of stories there.
But his willingness to not stick with Dave Brown and to go to Danny Cannell really did kind of change that season. He only had the defense that was there. The offense was finally able to make plays, and they did go on that run to win the division. But he took over the youngest team in the NFL. They were like, the average age was 27 at the time. I think Brian Williams was the oldest guy on that team.
Yes.
He was 35. So I mean, like the common, like Joe Judge, what he's been able to do, wins, losses aside, to at least install a culture and accountability that we haven't seen, it's a good start for any organization moving forward.
You know, you talk about a guy like Parcells. You know, not only did he do that and do some of those good things, you know, after he figured out who his quarterback should be, he also sat Lionel Manuel down before a playoff game. They cut him the morning of a playoff game because he did something awful. You know, he's that guy. He can be your best friend and he can do it, but if you do something wrong like he did with Anthony Wright in Dallas, you do something wrong, we can't trust you anymore, you're done. And I think Judge has that in him, that he can get to the bottom of stuff. Again, keeps everything internal just the way Coughlin did. You know, nobody knew that Andrew Thomas wasn't going to start that night at left tackle until after it didn't happen. Then they tell you why, and that's it. And that's the end of the story. So, you know, it's refreshing to get back to what we figure is the way the Giants work.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, one of the things that stood out to me, I was when I was reading the recap of the Bucs game, and apparently somebody in one of the press conferences asked him, what do you know about potentially sitting Daniel Jones down for one game? And Judge, who, as you and I both know, is prone to, he can be a little verbose with his explanations and comments. He basically responded with one word. No.
Exactly.
And right there, I mean, if you weren't a Joe Judge fan before then, right then and there, how could you not be after that? It's basically no explanation. No.
Didn't allow the follow-up.
Nope. Shut it down. Moving on.
The answer was no, next. And that was it. And that's what a young kid needs to see, right? That's what you want to see.
Absolutely.
Confidence helps a lot, and Jones has the Washington football team this week, so that could definitely help him out a lot if they win.
Hopefully.
All right. Speaking of no, let's move on to the New York Jets. So at least we can say the Giants are 5-3 against the spread if you do that sort of thing. The Jets are 0-8, 1-7 against the spread, though, with the cover against Buffalo. Very important. Anyway, the Jets are bad enough that GM Joe Douglas just this week needed a state of the team report. And that state, after we've seen everything go down this week, is Nevada. Anyway.
Oh!
Yeah, it's
well played. Well played.
A very, very ugly situation in the world. And it's a very ugly situation with the Jets. Anyway, Jay, let's start with you again as we talk about the offense.
Joe, unlike with the Giants, we're eschewing grades here because it would be Fs across the board, offense, defense, and special and coaching. It's been Fs since day one. I think Anthony, our rabbi, asked on one of the other shows, can we go lower than an F?
Anthony, it was great.
That's right. So what we're going to try and do here is find a bright spot, if at all possible. And for the Jets, at least, and on offense, it's like trying to find a rose in a swamp to a certain extent. Because we have beaten it to death on every show, and it's been so much wash, rinse, and repeat with how abjectly bad this offense has been, from lack of playmakers, misuse of the running backs, struggles of the offensive line, the regression in quarterback play from Sam Darnold, and the pathetic play calling from Adam Gase. So, through all that, there's only one player that I see who merits a positive grade.
You better tell me who it is.
Well, no, I want to see if your player is going to match mine. If you're able to find one.
Let me just tell you what I did today, because, you always give me these assignments with the Jets, and it's just because Dennis refuses to come on anymore.
I know. We got to talk about that.
And Christina's so disgusted that she doesn't want to talk about it anymore either.
Yeah, she's got a little baby. She's a mom now.
Exactly. She's doing just great. I went through their stats today because, you're a stats guy, Jay. So I am. So in 8 games, they have 94 points. 94 points. They have 4 receiving touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 1 defensive touchdown. They have 8 touchdowns in 8 games. So Pat Mahomes has 34.
21 touchdown passes.
They have 8 touchdowns in 8 games. Okay, they have minus 519 yards in penalties as a team. They have up minus 179 yards in sacks as an offense. And last year's point differential was minus 5.2. This year it's minus 18 points. This is with an offensive genius as a head coach, who I've heard that 3 times now this year. Once by the owner, once by the GM, and once by the guy himself. That they're an offensive genius. And a quarterback that was picked number 3 in the draft that many have said he should have gone 2 or maybe even 1. So I would say the only bright spot is that they traded away Le'Veon Bell and got some draft picks for him. And I'm not sure what they got. They got nothing for Robbie Anderson, so that's another F on their part. So the fact that they've had to play Mims and P. Ryan and a couple of these other guys and let them get, as we were talking about with the Giants, let them get some reps and let them see what college football was really like. And then they can watch some NFL players play on the other side of the field. That's about the only bright spot for this offense, is that they are actually on the field a little bit for 20 minutes a game, because there's nothing to look good at. You can't stand there. I don't know how the GM stands up in front and says, Adam Gase is part of the solution around here, and Sam Darnold is our quarterback. But you have 8 touchdowns in 8 games.
Well,
you have 500 yards in penalties. You have 200 yards in sacks. You're getting outscored by 18 points a game through 8 games.
Well,
how is there a positive to this?
I found one, and these guys have heard me talk about this.
They're going to get the number 1 pick in the draft. That's the other.
Maybe. Who knows?
And Trevor Lawrence won't come out, so wait for that.
So the one bright spot I was able to find, and he's a guy I've talked about before, and that's wide receiver Jamison Crowder. Crowder, 29 catches, 383 yards, 2 TDs. He's had 3 100-yard games. Leads the Jets with 46 targets. Despite only playing 4 games, he's never had less than 7 catches in any game or less than 10 targets. The obvious issue with Crowder has been health. He's on the injured list again, this time with a groin injury. So when he plays very well. It's just that they can't seem to keep him on the field. The one thing that I read something interesting about Darnold, and you tell me, I want you to hear your take on this, is that the rest of the season for Darnold is partially about trying to prove to the Jets organization that he is the quarterback for the future. The other side of it is that he's basically going to spend the next 8 games auditioning for the other 31 teams in the NFL.
I mean, again, if they have any brains, that's what he's doing. I personally don't think he cares. I think he's trying to figure out where he can get his $2 million to stand on the sideline, because he's going to be the other guy. He's going to be Matt Leinart all over again. He's going to play here and there. He's going to back up a few guys. He's going to go. Then he's going to quit, and then he'll be on TV somewhere.
I don't think he has enough presence right now to be on television. So I think you're wrong on that one.
But I mean, you talk about like Jamison Crowder, you say how well he's done, and it's true. So in limited time, he has 50% of the touchdown catches for the entire team. And he's only played 4 games. So it's there's just nothing there, and I don't know what I can't imagine that even Jet fans believe this at this point, that Adam Gase is part of the solution and Sam Darnold is the quarterback. And like you said, Rabbi, we were talking about this the other day with somebody else. Trevor Lawrence is not going to the Jets. So if you have half a brain and you're Joe Douglas, you trade that pick really early, because to somebody who might be able to talk Trevor Lawrence into coming, or you do the Herschel Walker kind of trade where you try to get 4 players and 4 picks. The Ricky Williams, can I have your entire draft for the number 1 pick?
That would be
That's
amazing.
what you're going to have to do, because otherwise you get nothing.
I honestly don't.
If you're not going to take Trevor Lawrence, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't come out and you're playing a third of a football season in college, none of these teams are going to finish their schedule. They're going to play 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, at the rate they're going.
So who are you going to pick? There's not some defensive stud. There's not.
Yeah.
I always give Anthony a hard time about Chase Young, but there's not a Chase Young. There's not another Bosa. There's not another Watt. There's not a running back. Maybe Travis Etienne, but he's not coming out either. So it's like, who are you going with the number 1 pick? If the number 1 pick's telling you to get lost, you have to trade it early. You can't wait for draft night and have somebody try to come up and get, because he's going to say, I'm not coming out months before that, if he thinks you're going to hold on to it. So you can't play possum with the number 1 pick like San Diego and the Giants did, where they said, pick who you want to pick. You can't do that in this draft, because he's going to say, I'm not coming out. And he's going to do it at the combine. So what are you going to do? You're going to be stuck. And then everyone knows you have to trade it, and then you're going to get nothing for it, which is exactly what the Jets will do.
I've said it before, and I said it to them on the group chat this week. I'm 50-50 on Lawrence right now, and I've never had somebody – I know the Jets are a disrespected organization, and rightfully so, and right now the NFL. But to basically say I'm going to stay in school because I don't want to join one team is stupid. And it's kind of immoral. And I even said, I understand Eli did the same damn thing. So
he stayed in the draft. He was going somewhere.
Yeah, he was going somewhere. And maybe Lawrence is the same.
And these guys may not remember, Joe, but I know you will. John Elway used the threat of playing baseball for the Yankees to ensure that he wound up in Denver and not somewhere else.
Right. But
Baltimore, Indianapolis.
They didn't opt out of the draft because they were seniors at the time, so they were leaving college. Eli was done at Ole Miss, so it's a different story in a lot of those cases. Now the kids come out in their sophomore, junior year, they have a lot more say on what they can do.
Anthony?
Wow. I mean, I get the defensive side. I mean, look, this team has given up 238 points. I'm sorry, 224, because apparently, according to Greg Williams, 14 of that didn't belong to the defense. But besides the point, Look, I had a tough time trying to find anything positive about the defensive side of football, considering this is a team that is on track to go 0-16. But I'll ask you, is there any kind of a bright spot on this Jets, the defensive side of football for the Jets?
Yeah, get rid of Greg Williams. Again, it's not, nobody's learning anything. If you got 519 yards in penalties in 8 games, nobody should be on the coaching staff. I'm sorry, there's not, and we've all watched it. They're all stupid penalties, right? They're all 15-yard unnecessary penalties, and you know that he's jacking them up to do that stuff, and he's past his prime. He's done.
Yeah.
You know, it was the big splash. Oh, Greg Williams, you're going to bring in the toughest guy in football. Well, when you got a bunch of kids, that doesn't work. You got to teach them how to play the game. Greg Williams is good for a defense that's already established that needs a little bit of an identity. You can't bring in a bunch of 20-year-olds and feed them to Greg Williams and think that they're going to learn anything, because they don't. Again, I go back to Joe Judge. When he does his Joe Judge report, he does it on film, and he says, here's what you do. You have to tackle that outside leg, so you force the guy to turn in. Greg Williams isn't teaching any of this stuff. Nobody's teaching any of this stuff. They're just saying to go out there, run around like a bunch of nuts and try to do something, and it's not working because their point differential is 18 points a game. And that's not completely on the offense, obviously, because the defense has given up. I've watched 4 straight Jet games for you guys because
we're so sorry. We appreciate your condolences.
The first drive is always good. They usually get down there, they score 3 points or 7 points, and then that's it for the rest of the game. And all they do, I mean, you saw them when they played Kansas City. 3-0, 7-3, 7-6, 14-6, 14-9, 21-9. And you're like, well, this game's over because you can't score 3 points against the Kansas City Chiefs and expect to do anything. So there's no bright spots in this team. But I can't wait for the next question.
Look, for me, look, I agree with you. Greg Williams, the Jets moving off of Greg Williams is going to be obviously the right move going forward, because I've said it time and time again, this is the most undisciplined football team I've ever seen on either side of the football. And Greg Williams is showing why he worked out in New Orleans. We have veterans. But when we went to Washington and Los Angeles, like younger teams, he flames out because his style does not work with younger players. Just go out there, do what you're told, and that's it. No, these are guys you got to teach. But the Jets do have to keep somebody on defense for next season. And Quentin Williams, the defensive tackle, is
guy I said last week they should trade.
Yeah, we said they should have traded. They didn't trade him. But if you're not going to trade him, you gotta have a building block somewhere. And obviously, that's the one thing that Adam Gase and Greg Williams can actually agree upon: the fact that he's a nice young player who has played a little better. Obviously, his for the rookie year, he's had injury problems, but you gotta build. You gotta keep something. I mean, that's pretty much what the Jets are. You look at the defensive side of football. The defensive backs, almost everyone have aspiring contracts or tradable contracts. They're temporary players as it is. And then you look at the linebacker situation, it's like literally the Jets was in a position where they should have been sellers. Avery Williamson basically tweeted himself in a Jet uniform, hailing a cab to go to Pittsburgh because he couldn't wait to get out of here.
And we say thank you very much.
That is the kind of culture that is in that locker room right now. And unfortunately, the best move is going to be moving on from the coaches. That's literally what the Jets need to do right now.
We talked about it 4 weeks ago. You took your best defensive player and traded him away. So how hard are the rest of the guys in that room gonna play?
Well,
they figured you gave up on him. You know, he was the only guy who had any care in the world about what we did, and he got rid of him. So why are they going to bother at this point at 0-8? So.
Well, they basically
opposite directions. Giants and Jets.
They're way too stingy right now. That's why they only ended up giving up Avery Williams, and then it was only 4 8th. All right. So, Joe, I'm actually not going to go with any positives here. Don't worry. I'm not going to ask you for that. But let's face it, Adam Gase is getting fired, whether it be before the end of the season or at the end of the season. So there are going to be a lot of head coaching candidates. I have 3 in mind, and I'm going to ask you what you're going to look for the next head coach in a second. I'm going to go the route of the coordinator, and I know you're not a big fan of it, but I'm not going to go with the route of, like, these experienced coordinators like Eric Bieniemy of the Chiefs. I'm thinking of two really out there names. Joe Brady, who I do for my time at LSU as the passing coordinator, who became the offensive coordinator this year with Carolina. He has a little bit of experience, but I think it's a good name to start from the bottom up. Byron Leftwich, who we just saw Monday night on the other side, who's done a good job acclimating Tom Brady to his system this year, although Brady's probably much of a coach himself, and Leftwich, again, is a guy you can start on the bottom with. And Matt Campbell of Iowa State he declined an interview with the Jets in 2018 before Adam Gase got hired, but he might change his mind and more success in Iowa State, and he will have a ton of cap space and picks to work with. So, Joe, what do you see in that next head coach of the New York Jets? And please don't tell me you think Adam Gase is coming back in 2020.
That's what we've been told, but I can't imagine it actually happened. So here's the thing that I think about all the time with these guys that have ruined their careers or put their other careers on hold to become head coaches. Guys like Steve Spagnuolo, who was a defensive coordinator, he's a linebackers coach, a defensive coordinator, won 2 Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator, came back as defensive coordinator, won another Super Bowl. He went off to LA, to the St. Louis, to the Rams, and was awful as a head coach. These guys who study one side of the ball their entire lives, who coach one side of the ball their entire lives, they coach 22 guys on the field. They can't be, and again, I'm going to go back to Joe Judge, they can't be this CEO thing of, I have to run the whole team now. I need a strong offense coordinator that's not going to listen to me. I can't be calling the plays standing on the sidelines. I can listen in, and I can do it, unless I have really good coaches underneath me, which it's all about staff when you put these guys together. Joe Judge came in, look at his staff. He's got college coaches, he's got NFL coaches, he's got head coaches, you got to build a good staff in there. And I just don't see, I don't think just because Patrick Mahomes throws 7 touchdowns a game that Eric Bieniemy is a genius. And I don't think that makes him a head coach. And I know every announcer in the world goes, I don't know how he's not a head coach. Well, you don't even know the guy. He was a player. He's a very good player. He's a good running back, probably a nice guy because you talk to him. And he's a very good offensive play caller. Doesn't mean he's a good coordinator. Doesn't mean because I have a feeling Andy Reid put some of those plays in. So I'm thinking, just like Bill Belichick always had a defensive coordinator, I have a feeling most of those defenses were Bill Belichick. So you can't just pluck this coordinator out and go, he's a head coach. It's a whole nother world. There's so much to deal with. Judge talks about it every day. He said, I got to look at the waiver. The reason they're there 24 hours a day is because of all the work that's put in just overseeing the team. They have to talk to the GM. They have to talk to the owners. They have to talk to the trainers. They have to know 75 guys and how they are. They need to know the practice squad. They got to make up practice schedules. You can't just bring in a guy that's used to going, run, play 7, and do it again because it's not good. That's not what head coaching is. So, although while I like some of your choices, and I think the guy from LSU maybe gets a little bit extra credit because of who his quarterback was, Joe Brady, because he had Burrow, but at least the guy has gotten some experience doing some different things. I don't think you can take a defensive guy and make him a head coach, take an offensive guy and make him a head coach. You need somebody who's done a few different things. Belichick, when he got hired, what did he get hired as at the Giants the first time? Special teams coach. Then he became a linebackers coach, and an outside linebackers coach. Then he became an inside linebacker. And then he coached the defensive back. Then he became the defensive coordinator. So, and he was in college before that. He coached at Army. He coached at Air Force. He coached at different places. Everybody thinks Parcells hired him. They actually got hired the same day. They came in. Belichick called Parcells and said, "Do you have any room on your staff at Air Force?" And he said, "Call me next week because something may change." And they ran into each other in the airport in New Jersey because they both got called from the Giants and they both got hired the same day. So here's a guy, again, this is like Sean McVay. Everybody goes, find another 30-year-old who's a genius. The guy grew up in football. His grandfather built the San Francisco 49ers. He didn't just come off the street at 30 years old and know how to run a football team. So you have to have somebody with full experience. I think the college route's a good way to go. I think a Bill O'Brien type, even the guy in Arizona is doing better because at least he was a head coach.
Yeah, Kingsbury has a lot of different.
They brought him in for the offense. They brought him in for Kyler Murray, but he was a head coach and had a huge program. He had 150 guys on the sideline. He had to be in control of a program. You need a guy who is in charge of Penn State. You need a guy who's in charge of Michigan. You need a guy who's in charge of Wisconsin that has this aura of this team, and he has to run the whole program. And by the way, he runs the whole stinking campus too because he's bringing all the money in. That's the guy you want. You can't have some guy that stood on the sideline all day looking at a play sheet and expect him to run your whole team.
Yeah,
we talked about it with the Giants, like the Pat Shurmurs, the Ben McAdoo's. They're not head coaches.
No, and one of the things, a lot of people talk about, well, Sean Payton, he's calling all the plays, and he's the head coach. But people also forget, because he's been doing it at New Orleans for so long, where did he come up? He wasn't, he didn't pop out of, his post-playing days as an offensive coordinator. Receivers coach, where else? It was a couple of position coaches before he even moved up to that.
He was in Dallas with Parcells. He was with, he was a receivers coach, like you said. So these guys know football.
Right, and that's the thing, is that even though they may be calling the plays from one side of the ball or the other, they have experience beyond that enables them to do it. Some guys, it's not their thing. Even if they were play callers at some point, when they take over as a head coach, they decide they don't want to do that anymore because they understand the responsibility. You look at a guy like, my head coach, Mike Tomlin. Tomlin took over, didn't want to call the plays. Hired an offensive coordinator, hired a defensive coordinator, said, do your thing, and I'm up here. I will listen in. I will set the overall strategy and culture, but I got too many other things to do. So, and honestly, some guys, that's where they are. And that's what makes them the coach that they are, because they recognize that, okay, maybe I can't do both. And even if I can, I probably shouldn't, because I'll be splitting my focus, and I know that about myself. So I agree with you. You have to find somebody who has a wider range of football experience, and it's going to be very interesting, because I think, Joe, this hire is going to be what puts the stamp on Joe Douglas's tenure as GM, especially because at the end of the year, he's got to fire a guy who bent over backwards to bring him in because he wanted this guy as his GM.
I think he eventually I think Case also sees the writing on the wall too, and if he doesn't, he's kind of
yeah. I don't know if that guy sees the writing on any wall.
He has to see the writing on the wall. I don't think he's that much of an idiot.
And I think when you go back to the New Orleans story, Peyton and Breeze are like joined at the hip. They talk this same language on the offense. I guarantee you, when he finally leaves, there's going to be a struggle there of some sort, because trying to teach that breadth of knowledge that he's given Breeze over 15 years where they can finish each other's sentences, that's not going to happen the next time.
No.
So how is that? Again, that's what that is. You can't take a guy out of a position. Why is the guy from New England, the offensive coordinator, never been able to make it anywhere else? Because him and Tom Brady talk the same language. They know what each other can do. As soon as you take them out of there, both of them were lost. But, he didn't know how to handle himself. Went to be the head coach of Denver and screwed it up from day one by saying, hey, maybe I'll trade my quarterback. I don't really like Jay Kaplan. You can't do that as a head coach. You can do that as a coordinator because you get cover from the head coach. But I think that's what they need to do. I think they need to go bigger, and they need to go CEO style. And I don't know if Harbaugh is going to get fired out of Michigan. I don't know.
He's not.
Some guy, too bad.
Fortunately.
But a guy like that who's not too old, not a Fangio type guy, but a guy who's not too old, who can relate to some players, who maybe is coming out of a halfway decent college program, but a big college program, a Baylor, or like
they had that guy in Matt Rule last year, and they let him go to Carolina.
Hasn't really, and even he's struggled a bit with what's gone on.
A little bit, but he's done a lot more with that team than anybody thought he would do with that team.
So maybe that's the type of guy that I'm talking about, is a fairly large school. I don't hate to name names, but and come out with that guy who's used to being in charge and being in charge of everything.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting who the Jets make as their next hire again. If Adam Gates gets fired, and if he doesn't get fired, it's going to be one of the biggest shocks that we've ever seen in coaching.
Yep.
All right. Let's move on to the rest of the NFL, and because we don't want to talk about the prospective number 1 and 2 teams in the NFL draft, we want winners, just like Mike Singletary says. So we have less than 3 months before the big game in Tampa Bay, and we have less than 2 until the NFL playoffs begin with, I believe, 64 teams once expansion is already done.
Yeah, exactly.
So our next questions will reflect the rest of the NFL, and Joe will answer them again. Here's Anthony to start us off.
Yeah, you know what? I like the NFC side of the bracket, and I gotta be honest, there's literally just one team that has literally stood out quite a bit in this so far this season. But I'd like to know your opinion. What team do you think is the best team in the National Football Conference so far through the first 8 games of the season?
First, playing up to this point, and again, schedules matter and injuries, health matters and all that stuff. I have to go with Seattle. Again, looked up some stats today to keep Jay happy. They went from a 0.6 scoring differential last year, 0.06 to 5.9 this year. So major improvement on whatever they've been doing with Russell Wilson, letting him play more, letting him cook more, whatever the story is there. I still don't like his style of play on some of the stuff, but the fact that they've gotten more production out of some of their wide receivers, they've kind of gotten everybody to play together. It's not as centric on Marshawn Lynch. It's not as centric on different guys. It's on a Doug Baldwin. It's more spread out, and I think that they've done a better job of that. Their running back gets hurt, they plug another one in. So obviously the offensive line works. Everybody's playing well. I like Seattle as at the moment for the NFC, which is not very strong at the moment. To say the least, because you have one whole division that's not even included.
Well, no, it should never be included on the face of this earth. But that's
so without having to worry about that whole division, and the South is not anything to scream home about with Atlanta looking terrible, and again Carolina in a rebuilding mode, and so New Orleans is doing okay there. But I think Seattle's definitely the class of the NFC at this moment.
I actually agree with you. And you know what? I got to give a lot of credit to Pete Carroll as well. I mean, you think about only Bill Belichick has really had this much longevity success this past decade as Pete Carroll. You think about it, how he's transitioned this team from the run-driven defensive first team led by the Legion Boom that we saw early half of this decade in 2014, obviously winning the Super Bowl, to now finally listening and letting Russell Wilson cook, because nothing was more maddening than two seasons ago in the playoffs against Dallas and the ultra-conservative play calling that drove me nuts in that game. Dallas obviously wound up winning late. But, no, he's done a great job as far as it's more of Russell Wilson's team, his leadership. But did you see the hustle play with DK Metcalf on Sunday Night Football? That is teachable. I mean, you got to teach guys to play hard on every play. And the fact, well, first of all, Metcalf's not human. That's number one. But the fact that he chased down and stopped a touchdown, and it worked out well because Arizona went for it on 4th down and didn't score any points. So that was a really big play. They did lose in overtime. But to see that hustle play, like I think back to Don Beebe in the Super Bowl chasing down Leon Lett. You have to literally tell guys to play hard every game. So when you see a guy in Dallas and the Cowboys talking about we don't play hard on every snap, as a head coach, that judge is nice. And for Pete Carroll, it's like we talked about with coaching Joe Judge and obviously with the Jets, it's a culture thing. And you want to install that with not just the veterans, but the young guys, but you have the right veteran in Russell Wilson who knows how to win, who plays the game the right way, who knows how to inspire his teammates. And you see young guys playing like that, that's a great combination. And Seattle being in one of the tougher divisions in a a relatively down year for the NFC. Let's be honest. NFC East aside, because I think we all could get together and win the NFC East at this point. But like I said, Pete Carroll is doing a really great job, and the fact that he's been able to transition from one style of a roster to another and been able to kind of keep that longevity of success. Even when the Seahawks last year, they won a lot of games, and they weren't a great team on both sides of football. This year, they're a little bit better. They're a little more offensively driven. But like I said, coaching goes a long way when you get to have that kind of success.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, to me, the hallmark of any good coach is his ability to adapt to the team around him. It's fine to have a system. It's fine to have a scheme. But if you are one of those guys who is constantly pounding the round peg into the square hole, Adam Gase, you're not going to last very long. The coaches who have the longevity, whose teams consistently are competing for the playoffs and in the playoffs, they are able to adapt to the changing circumstances, the changing roster, the changing, trends in the NFL, if you will, because as much as the NFL seems to be in a certain era for a certain specified period of time, even within that time frame, the game does change year to year. And if you can adapt, you will have continued success because players will recognize that. And that Carroll is another one of those guys. His players just continually want to play for him. He got flack for it at USC, but I mean, for those of us who remember his time there, this is pretty much the same guy. He adapted to the changing world around him, and it's why his teams won in college. It's why the Seahawks win consistently under him.
And plus,
yeah, it's funny. He's a good recruiter, too, and he's gotten a lot of good players on this team. This is the most talented wide receiving core he's ever had.
And DK Metcalf is the second coming of Megatron.
Oh, God, let's stop.
You're also decided to build this team around the one guy you had to pay, because the reason you lost the back end of your defense was because you can't pay everybody. So they decided who the right guy was. They made the right choice. Don't forget, they had just paid $50 million for Matt Flynn when Russell Wilson walked in the door and told him to take a walk. And so they picked the right guy. They won a Super Bowl before they had to pay him. And then once that happened, they lost the back end. They should have won 2, but they lost the back end. And so you had to adapt. And it shows what a good organization it is.
All right, let's talk about the AFC now, which is actually a little bit stronger than the NFC. So, Jay, why don't you just continue us?
Look, I think everybody knows where I'm going with my pick for this. But, Joe, the AFC, more depth, I think, in terms of upper level and even second level in terms of contenders. The AFC is a lot deeper this year than the NFC is. But with that in mind, at the midway point, the number 1 seed for the AFC if the playoffs started today.
Yeah, without a doubt. Because we have to, like we said, as we're going now, we're not going, through any other things, but what's going on right now. And I think having a quarterback take a year off after 15 years is just brilliance, by the way. I would say
do without the elbow surgery.
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh is obviously the top of the class here. And again, going back to my little stat, because I fell in love with the scoring stat today, they were minus 0.09 differential, and this year they're 9.9 differential in scoring. So the offense is back. They keep finding wide receivers to throw to, no matter who they are, guys they don't have to pay. They get rid of guys as they want to get rid of. You don't want to play here anymore, you can leave. And that's how it's been in Pittsburgh. And it's a positive. And again, having the ability to watch the first game that you guys played against us and have to really concentrate on the game instead of the way I usually watch flipping through different games, it's obvious what your defense is up to in that they pick the one guy that has to be taken out, and then they actually do it. We hear that every week. Oh, we can't let so-and-so beat us, and then the guy beats you. They took Saquon Barkley completely out of game 1. They took Lamar Jackson completely out of the Baltimore game to the point where he looked confused. He couldn't run. He couldn't do his normal stuff. They were waiting for that. They expected it. And then, again, they have the athletes to accomplish what they set out to do. So I think they're the most complete team. I think, obviously, Kansas City's right there. I'm not a big fan of if you don't knock off the champ, they're still the champs. But Kansas City did lose a game in division. So you have to say, okay, we'll see. Again, this is to this point. And you start to look at these different things. Baltimore, on my little stat sheet, was plus 13.5 last year in point differential. They're down to plus 10, going in the wrong direction. So people are starting to figure that one out. Whereas, again, you're now back to your old selves and picked up a few extra guys, and I think you're a very, very strong contender for everything that's going on in the AFC.
Yeah, and what's weird for me, guys, is I haven't been in this position in a very long time, so I'm not quite sure how to look at it. Steeler fans are always waiting for the other shoe to drop when the team is doing well, and especially when they do this well. The mantra has always been, we're the Steelers. We don't do anything the easy way. And for me, and I've talked about it with these guys a couple of times, this 7-0 record's kind of been put together without playing anyone of significance until the last 2 weeks. They almost let that game get away from them against the Titans. Last-second missed field goal is the reason they get the W, though I got to say, their defense has done the best job containing, the beast man in Derrick Henry. The Ravens beat themselves. The Steelers played well. I'll give them that, but I think it's more about the fact that the Ravens beat themselves. So the rematch on Thanksgiving night is going to be telling. And this team may be undefeated, but to me, they're far from perfect. I mean, the defense is still doing its thing. They're giving up 20 points a game. It's a little higher than last year. They're not causing as many turnovers. They are second in the NFL in interceptions with 10. But they're still in the bottom half of the league in third down conversions allowed and red zone touchdown percentage allowed. Thankfully, they still have a pass rush that leads the NFL with 30 sacks, and they're number 3 in total yards allowed. And look, we all knew that if the defense was even remotely close to what it was last year, and last year they played out of their minds from the point in which Minka Fitzpatrick came over, all that team would need would be the return of Ben Roethlisberger. He's back, and you cannot underestimate this. And, Joe, you and I have talked about it, and you know this as well as I do. There is a huge difference in having 15 years of experience looking across that line of scrimmage as compared to the guys they had looking across that line of scrimmage last year. They're scoring more points this year. They're 30 per game, number 5 in the NFL, despite the fact that they're living this year on a throw short, run long type of passing game. Roethlisberger is not throwing the ball down the field as often as he used to, except for at least a couple of shots per game, to James Washington or to Chase Claypool. And the run game, while it's significantly improved from last year, it's still in the middle of the pack. However, they're getting it done on third down, number 3 at almost 50%, and they're top 10 in the red zone percentage at 2/3. And whereas last year they were settling for 3s, this year they're getting 7s. I did not expect Chase Claypool to be the playmaker he's become. I did figure that the things would improve with the return of Ben Roethlisberger, James Conner, and Juju Smith-Schuster. I didn't expect the wide receiving core to be as productive across all of the depth as it's been. Eric Ebron's been a nice pickup at tight end. Nobody is surprised that TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, and Stephon Tuitt each have 6 sacks. Mike Hilton has been huge, and they need to get him back from injury as soon as possible. Vince Williams seems to have rediscovered his game. And the loss of Devin Bush, while it hurts, hasn't been as an egregious as a loss as when they lost Ryan Shazier a few years ago. Robert Spillane's been decent, and I say thank you to the New York Jets for, the gift of Avery Williamson. The thing to me is, the rest of the schedule. Baltimore's going to be tough again. Buffalo's going to be a challenge. Cincinnati, I can't sleep on them the way their offense has been playing of late. And Joe Burrow is rounding into the form we kind of expected for him. The Colts are also rounding into form. Phillip Rivers has seemed to find his game. So it's very possible that while they're 7-0 now, the rest of the season 6-3, 5-4. So I think they get out of the AFC North. But I still think that the road to the Super Bowl for the AFC goes through Kansas City. I mean, on paper, it doesn't look like a 7-0 team. That's why we don't play the games on paper. They seem to do just enough every week against every team to find a way to get a win. And that's the hallmark of a good team, and it will, behoove them, and it'll down the stretch. They need to keep it up. I think it's doable, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm like, come on, guys, keep going.
The only problem in the NFL when you go 7 or 8-0 is you're probably, unless you're super special, you may only win 4 more games the rest of the year. If winning 12 games in the NFL is huge. And you're going to have guys taking rest. You're going to have different things. So, we say about Tom Coughlin used to get a lot of criticism because he goes 6-2, and you go, hey, you said he's going to win 10 games. So that means they're going 4-4 the rest of the year, according to your prediction. So let's not give him a hard time when he goes 4-4 and go, oh, he's a failure. He goes 6-2. You're not going to win more than 11, 12 games in the NFL in a normal year.
No, and 11-5 is what I predicted them at the beginning of the year.
Right. So
a very good prediction right now, that's for sure. By the way, Kansas City, you're going to find out a lot more about them. They haven't really played a lot of big games in the first half of the season. I mean, the 2 most impressive games to me was the win at Baltimore, which they really it was not a 34-20 game. It was a dismantling of a game. And the game at Buffalo, where they just had one of the best rushing performances, the best rushing performance in Andy Reid's coaching tenure. But then you got at Las Vegas, at Tampa Bay, at Miami, and at New Orleans. It's 4 games that are going to be tough. But if they end up the season 13-3, 14-2, I don't know how you can't say that Kansas City's been the best.
Yeah.
And I think Lamar Jackson single-handedly won the Pittsburgh Steelers game on Sunday, but that's just you start the game with a pick 6. You're not putting yourself on the right direction. All right.
Nope, and you end it with a fumble when you were getting into position to potentially have a shot to win the game. So his turnovers bookended that. That's why I say, it's more that the Ravens lost that game than the Steelers dominated en route to that win.
Although you do have to give the Steelers credit for the really good offensive third quarter that they played to get themselves back in the game, because it almost looked like they had no shot at going to happen.
Yep.
All right, Joe, so we're going to switch over to the last teams in the playoffs. Remember, there are 3 wild cards this year. Let me tell you my picks first. I'm not sure on the AFC. I think the team you're going to mention definitely should be in. The NFC North loser is going to get in. And then it's kind of an interesting, really muddled group after that. I guess I'll go Las Vegas will make the playoffs, because it's really tough after that. I don't think Miami is going to kind of get over the hump, although the way that team played against the LA Rams, who the hell knows? That was a really good game. And if Tua even shows a flash of brilliance, watch out. NFC, it's going to be really tough. I'm going to just go with the NFC South loser, who I predict to beat New Orleans. I want to say Tampa Bay, but New Orleans has a tough matchup on Sunday against those same Buccaneers. And Drew Brees apparently will take an even shorter pass over a short pass to throw. His arm strength is virtually done, and we'll get to that in a second. So, Joe, who do you see out of those final 2 spots?
Well, and I'm not going to say I read the question wrong, but I think one of the teams that'll get in that will be a surprise this year and will not win a division will be Indianapolis, as we mentioned, in the AFC. And again, they've gone from minus .08 to +9 on their scoring. So bringing Phillip Rivers in and doing that whole thing has actually worked for them. The defense has played fantastic. And I think they can only get better as far as that goes. They haven't had really an easy schedule. But I think they can hang in there and grab one of those spots. Kind of asking who's the last team to get in was how the question was originally kind of put. But I think just talking through this, I would agree with you. The Raiders have a good chance. I don't see maybe Miami coming up. I think Buffalo's going to win the East. And so you kind of look at different teams in that nature. And then in the NFC, I had said Arizona because, again, they've made this great leap that Kyler Murray's figured the system out. They were -5 last year. They're +8 in point differential this year. So the Kingsbury experiment seems to be working at this point, and the defense as well. They made obviously the greatest steal trade in the history of football from the Houston Texans, getting DeAndre Hopkins. who's playing well and has always been a good guy, even though some people give him a hard time about some things. He's really a good citizen. He's a good player. He fits well in Arizona. Obviously, the last team that's going to get into the NFC playoffs is whoever manages to win the East.
They still get a home game, though. They still get a home game.
So when the Giants go with 6 wins or whoever goes with 6 or 7 wins, that, without counting them, we're saying teams that maybe would surprise you a little bit. Coming out of the West, you're going to get – for a while you thought you were going to get 3 teams out of the West.
Yeah.
But San Francisco has just imploded health-wise and injury-wise, and Nick Mullins may have come out and looked good in our game, but I don't think it's going to work. I don't know what the score is tonight. Their turnover ratio is negative. Their scoring is way, way down. I don't think, with George Kittle out for 6 weeks, with all these guys out, I just don't see how they hang in there in that division.
No.
So I think they're done. And so that cuts it down to so I think Arizona moves up into that spot, and you're going to figure Green Bay. All those teams are playing so poorly at this point. Detroit's so bad. Minnesota's just looked awful in the first part of the season. So who do you think is actually going to be above 500 in the NFC? I think it's an AFC heavy laden year.
Well, Anthony was mentioning to us, especially during our pre-show, Chicago, who is still shockingly 5-3. Nick Foles is they have really no answer at quarterback, but they have an easy schedule, so I think they have a chance to scrounge up 4 wins. And if you don't think 9-7 can't get you to the playoffs in the NFC, you got another thing coming.
Yeah, no, that's.
And I tell you what, it is not inconceivable that 3 teams come out of the AFC North if Cleveland can manage to right the ship, and they may actually be better served overall with OBJ out because they don't have to worry about getting him the ball all the time. And if they can right that ship, it's not inconceivable.
Did you see Baker Mayfield on Sunday, Jay? That got proven wrong for a little while there.
Look, I'm just saying, it's not inconceivable. The defense is decent. The O-line, if they can, Stefanski's got them going in the right direction. It's a question of, can they maintain that enough? Because I'll tell you what, I don't think 2 teams are coming out of the AFC East this year. I just don't.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So let's move on. Finally, we will all weigh in. Everybody will talk this time, although we've been pretty much talking the whole entire show. But this time we'll actually have an opinion to ourselves. Let's all weigh in on the mid-season MVP of the NFL. We will all make different picks. Joe, you luckily draw your name out of the hat. You're the road team, so you get to go first for NFL MVP in 2020.
Isn't that funny how that happens?
Yeah, it's a rigging of the hat, but we'll let it slide.
Or, it's just us being hospitable to our guests.
Yeah, you can move me around a little bit. I feel part of the family as it is. I'll go back to what I had said about team-wise too. I'll just go with Russell Wilson, and think that at this moment he has meant more to his team than most people. I think Roethlisberger is going to be in the conversation, but I would say right now Russell Wilson has done a lot for his team, and again, losing their running back, having to kind of rebuild a few different things, as Anthony said, kind of change the way that they play. I think he's been the key to them being able to do that. So I'll go with Russell Wilson.
All right, Jay, you're up next. And no, you can't defend Roethlisberger. It's not a logical.
No, look,
he's thrown a couple of INTs in that Tennessee game.
I'm glad as hell that Ben is back. I'm happy about that. But he's not going to. He might be my pick as Steelers team MVP for what he's meant for the turnaround. But in terms of the NFL at the midway point, I'm going with Patrick Mahomes. And here's where we've come around to on Mahomes, guys. He threw for 416 yards and 5 touchdowns in that 35-9 win over the Jets, and it pretty much flew under the radar. Why? Because we've come to expect these types of games from him each and every week. We're more surprised when he doesn't put up numbers like this. He's like the LeBron James of the NFL, so he gets looked at through the same prism. No 30-point triple-double? Is LeBron okay? The Lakers may have won convincingly, but that's not the takeaway. with the same with Mahomes and the Chiefs. And it may happen like it did with LeBron this season, that we're so used to these types of performances that the MVP voters take it for granted instead of recognizing it for what it is. Pure genius level play at the toughest position on the football field. Almost 67% completion percentage. He's averaging 289 yards passing per game. He has 21 touchdowns against 1 interception. 8.2 yards per attempt. His passer rating is 115. Number 2 in the NFL in passing yards. Number 2 in touchdown passes. Number 3 in touchdown percentage. Number 1 in the NFL, as in the lowest interception percentage, and number 2 in passer ratings. Look, Russell Wilson, can't argue with the way he's been cooking this year. Aaron Rodgers as well. Both of them may be getting more press for the seasons that they're having. But Mahomes is the reason the AFC still goes through Kansas City, even if the Steelers end up with the AFC's first round bye and home field through the playoffs. The Chiefs are the AFC's best team, possibly the NFL's best team, and Mahomes is the best player on the best team. For me, that math works out to MVP.
I think the one thing that we do have to realize about the Kansas City Chiefs is they're just so much more of a team, especially you have Edwards-Helaire, you have Hill. Obviously, everybody gets a touch on that team, but you're right. Mahomes really is the LeBron James of the NFL. It's really amazing after only 4 years on the job. Mm-hmm. All right, Anthony, your choice.
You know what? I know he's kind of fallen off the national radar the last few weeks, but I'm going to go with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And look at it like this. There is a reason why Buffalo is sitting at 6-2 and atop the AFC East. Look, 2,100 yards passing. He's 10th in the league. That has 16 touchdowns to go with only 5 interceptions. QBR over 80 and completing just under 70% of his passes. You look at the first 4 games of the season. He came out pretty high, and he was in a conversation there. But his passer rate was at 122. The first 4 weeks of the season, which was on pace to kind of break Jim Kelly's team record of 101 for a season. Obviously, the last 4 games he's kind of tamped it down a little bit. 2 of those games, to his, fairness to him, was in bad weather. Obviously, the game against Kansas City, where it felt like it was a wintry mix of whatever you can pull out of a hat.
Hey, he's from Buffalo. He should be used to that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So like, we're in Buffalo. He should have had Bob Levy give him a speech of what it's like to play in the cold. When it's too cold for them, it's just right for us. You have to kind of figure that out at some point. But also another thing that's been different for the last few weeks is the fact that teams are playing more zone coverage against Buffalo. They don't have much of a running game to speak of. And so obviously he's been forced to take more shorter passes. The chunk plays that he was getting early this season has kind of tapered off a little bit, but he's still got great solid numbers. And obviously the rest of the schedule the next month is going to be very important because you got Seattle coming up Sunday. Seattle has struggled defensively this season. You got the Steelers coming up as well. You got the 49ers. Those are teams. And the Cardinals, obviously, next Sunday. So this is going to be a great measure of how far along Josh Allen has come as a quarterback because you got the Buffalo media asking, is the bad Josh Allen's back after really just one bad game in 4 games? I mean, he's played well. He just haven't put out the highlight reel plays that we were seeing early in the season because teams are starting to take that away. I mean, look at Stephon Diggs' numbers. Obviously, it's not because of a lack of passing yards. It's the fact that he's not getting the big chunk of yards. He's learning to take what teams are giving him, and that's kind of helped Buffalo. I mean, he threw for over 300 yards against the Jets 2 weeks ago, even though he didn't throw for any touchdowns. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Jets were playing more zone, and Josh Allen being able to run and pick up yards as a scrambler, as a running quarterback, was also a big factor into that. But he did take what the defense was giving him, and that is definitely a big improvement of from what we saw last year in the regular season. And in that playoff game against Houston, where it seemed like he did everything in his power to give that game away in his own right. So Josh Allen is my dark horse right now. Do I think he'll win it? No, because I think Russell Wilson and Mahomes are kind of like and Aaron Rodgers, a notable mention, is kind of setting the standard as far as outrageous quarterback play with very average talent around you. But Josh Allen, you know what? If he can get back to the way he was playing the next 4 games, I can see Buffalo really being a dangerous threat in the AFC. They're right now, if the season ends, they're the 3 seed in the AFC in a home playoff game. And in Buffalo in December, January, it's not exactly a fun picnic as a fan. As a player, it's even worse.
Yeah, I like Josh Allen a lot, but you would think his days at Wyoming when he had really bad weather, he would be playing a little bit better. But it's good to see Buffalo because I thought they would tail off a little bit this year, do very well. And guys, I did say Stephon Diggs would be a pretty good Buffalo Bill. And
yeah, we got to go through that
one.
Did.
Good. I also mentioned Seattle would make the Super Bowl, and kind of right now on the right track. All right. I'm throwing a curveball and not picking the guy I picked in the production meeting. So stay on your toes, guys. It's Alvin Kamara for me of the New Orleans Saints.
Okay.
Everything. Yep. No Michael Thomas since week 1. The numbers are kind of amazing. They have very, very little threats. I mean, Traquan Smith is still a young baby. Emmanuel Sanders has been okay, out with COVID last week. The numbers, like I said, he hasn't rushed for 100 yards in any game, but he's rushed for 45 or more, and the only game he didn't was against Tampa Bay. Receiving-wise, as a receiver, and as I mentioned, Drew Brees does not like to throw the ball far anymore. I think we know that. 5 or more receptions in all but one game. 9 receptions, 8 receptions, 8 receptions, 13 receptions, 9 receptions, 5 receptions. Going back from this last Sunday against Chicago. 7 touchdowns, although none in the last 3 games. And really, New Orleans, you can basically thank Kamara for almost all of their wins. And New Orleans has been really the roller coaster team all season. After the first game against Tampa Bay, where they kind of dominated Brady, it was a 34-23 game, doesn't really reflect the score. 2 overtime games against Chicago and the Los Angeles Chargers. Carolina, close game. Detroit, close game. Green Bay, they lose. Close game, though. This team, I don't think, would be anywhere near the form as we've seen the Saints in the last couple of years if Alvin Kamara wasn't running the ball out of the backfield. He does a little bit of everything, and this team has become – it's out of Drew Brees' hands as Drew Brees' team, although Brees is the legend, and him and Tom Brady will probably be passing each other for the rest of the season on the career touchdowns list.
Back and forth.
Yes. And now it's gone from Drew Brees' team really to Alvin Kamara's team, and the New Orleans Saints go as far as he takes them.
Yep, I agree with you, Rabbi.
All right. So after a lot of healthy discussion, we have reached the end of the show. Man, the NFL is really dominating this week. But I do have to say one thing. The amount of COVID stuff, I know we don't want to talk about COVID, but all of these facilities shut down. Fox's college football game completely wiped out because of COVID. A whole conference losing their games this weekend because of COVID. Get your act together, sports, because you can't go on like this for much longer. You might get through your season, but you're kind of embarrassing yourselves here with the amount of games lost, especially.
We expect better from you.
We expect better from you, but we don't really expect better from you. Anyway, thank you tonight to Mr. Joe Tufaro. He writes for writes for the last word on sports, and you can find him again on Twitter, on Instagram at TuffDan. And we'll allow you to stay for the end of the show, by the way, too, because we're nice like that.
And I'll make you a deal. I'll see you in 4 more weeks, or when Adam Gase gets fired.
If Adam Gase gets fired, we'll allow you to talk bad about the Jets as much as you want, and I think we might do a whole entire show about that. That'll be fun. Anyway, for Jay Kaplan, Anthony Strait, and Mr. Joe Tufaro, my name is Steven Rabinowitz. Thank you for joining us tonight. You can find us every week live on Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines. You can see this show the very next day on YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines. And
you can follow us on Twitter at ONTH Sportslines, where the link to this show will be available for you tomorrow.
Guys, the NBA draft is coming up, and that's what we will talk about next week, as we'll be 6 days away from the NBA draft at that point. A lot of football going on, but we're going to slowly, we might be able to get the other sports around in the near future. Anyway, from On the Sports Lines, we have no call right now for anything that's going on, so States keep counting, and everyone else, good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.